Hello once again, everyone, and not welcome back to the saddle. I almost said that, right? The idea is that this is going to be about how to win Totentanz. So if you don't know what Totentanz is the name of our wound system game. It's been kind of what we've played with for all of our steel in-house journeys since we got the app developed. And it's also been what we've used at EHA last year for the unarmored fighting portion of it. This year we're going to do the same. We're also going to do it in armor, and I'll do my own separate video explaining how that works. But a couple people who are visiting or have visited us have played with Totentanz before. Alternatively, you may have gotten the app off the App Store and played with it yourself. Of course, everyone can house rule whatever they want, but in this case, I wanted to do a video ahead of EHA talking about if it's your first time doing it, how do you win at Totentanz? How should you adjust your fencing to play within the game? So what is the game? The game idea is that any hit is now counted. So Eric, even though he's wearing the stuff, and for the rest of our our event that would count for something, he's wearing basically the same as what I'm wearing right now. This is simulating unarmored fencing with sharp swords to incapacitation, grievous wound, death, right? And so because of that, the goal is to incapacitate your opponent effectively, either by full out dropping them or making them call it a day. And most bouts should end about that way. I hit Eric significantly enough in a vital area that he goes, nope, I'm good, bows out, I get a win, he still lives, and we go until either there's maximum wins out of bow outs or what have you. I've got that further explained in everything. But now I want to get into the nitty gritty of it, which is how to play the game. So firstly, we need to talk about the rules we're running under. So the app has a couple different selections of things. We are running, and we always do run, with prevent outliers on. That means that a light hit isn't going to magically incapacitate him, and a serious hit can't do nothing. We just think that's fair. If you want to play with that off on your own time, by all means. But what I did is I ran the numbers just to give a general sort of target area. So to run through them, what they are, the areas that you're looking at is you've got head, which is pretty much everywhere from here over. Face, which is of course his face. Neck, which is generally represented by about the bib. Anything goes in toward bib, we're counting that as neck. You have chest. Now chest actually extends, go ahead and let your arm first. Chest, we go ahead and extend down to about here, about your stomach. This sort of area where the lungs, the heart, the liver, all that important stuff is chest. Other torso means the thrust comes lower than that, or alternatively any cut to any sort of area here. Then there's limbs, which is just catch-all for his arms and his legs. And then there is hands, which are of course defined by here about to a little deep on the wrist, so about midway through that cuff is what we count as hands. So those are all individual target areas that the app has and that we judge under. Then you have severity of hit, which goes from light, normal, serious. I'll come back to exactly what that means in a second. But running the numbers, and I just went, and Eric said the same thing, just sat down and ran the numbers real quick. These areas can vary quite a bit. So, for example, and we're not going to go like crazy into detail, but I'll just kind of run through them quickly. A hit to the head with our light, 2 of those cuts, I did 5 for each, 2 of those cuts did nothing. The shortest timer was 15 seconds of life. A normal hit, 1 of those cuts incapacitated, the longest timer was 47 seconds, so not doing so well, we're only on normal. And then a serious hit, 2 of those were incapacitations, the longest timer was 19 seconds. So in general, as you might expect, attacking the head is a good place to go. At very least, you're gonna get under a minute time. Now it does have a higher chance to do nothing, and we'll talk about that when we go over the severity bit, in particular there's a lot of quality stuff that can go into. Skulls are hard, but in general, targeting this area is good if you have good structure behind it. Face, on the other hand, is a little bit better. So on the light hit, we didn't get an incapacitation this time, but we did have the smallest timer was 16 seconds, the longest timer was 48 seconds. When it came to a normal hit, we had 1 incapacitation, and the longest timer was 20 seconds. And then when it came to the serious hit, 4 of the 5 were incapacitations, and the longest timer was 11 seconds. So that's pretty dang deadly. Anything hits you in here, you do have a decent chance of walking it off, at least initially, and light hits to the face actually happen more than you would think, but any sort of strike that gets into this area, thrust, cut, what have you, with a little bit of structure behind it has a decent chance of putting it down pretty quickly. So again, nice and safe, as you might expect. Neck was a little bit worse. For light, we had one did nothing, one was a 3-second timer, and then the longest timer was 20 seconds. So even a light hit to the neck, there's a lot of fatal stuff in there, as you might expect. When it came to medium, we had one incapacitation, longest timer was 5 seconds, particularly unlucky. And then when it came to serious, we had one incapacitation and the longest timer was 3 seconds. So again, as you might expect, attacks into the whole head area are pretty deadly. Nothing really anyone's not used to playing under. Any sort of rule set generally assigns that as a good target area. The only thing you might need to assess is in regards to your cut. So we'll put a pin in this and I'll talk about what I mean. So, in particular, and especially in my school, I mostly tell people to aim for the temple when they're cutting. So that would be me hitting Eric here, or if I am going to cut to his head, it's more off the top. I generally don't like to throw blows in at the side of the head or down into the neck. The reason being is because, Eric in that mask, that's not very bad. But if I put a good cut and start hitting into that area, that has the possibility of breaking more things. However, that does actually fly in contrary to what you should do if you're trying to fatally fight someone. The skull is quite hard. Sure, the face is vulnerable, but this is a pretty strong area. And furthermore, you can get cuts that lacerate the face that don't actually puncture the brain case. It'd be much better when I throw my strike to, again, temple, because I'm getting into the softest part of the skull, but if you go under Fiore's advice, then my target should be into the neck and across the torso, which, going under our rules there, if I'm not threatening his face, I'm cutting his neck, which also takes our game just kind of down a little bit of a tick, which does lead to slight changes. So for example, if I'm cutting at Eric and he does a counter cut to bind, more toward the top of his head or his temple, so I throw a cut and he binds, our arms tend to end up more up here, right? Which is fine. We can still do plenty of things from here. There's plenty you can do. But conversely, I throw my cut a lot more intent upon hitting below temple or into neck. His counter cut now has to be a little bit more structured down the middle if he wants to be safe. That slight level change, the middle game versus the high game, which I've talked about more, affects things. And if you're not used to fencing, defending that fatal area, because people aren't going for it intentionally, there can be a bit of a shock. And in particular, now you've got huge consequences if they get through. Now, moving on, thrust to chest. So thrust to chest, our light hit, we had one incapacitation, longest timer was 24 seconds, not a good start. Our medium hit, we had the shortest timer was 5 seconds, we didn't have incapacitation, but I think that was mostly just luck. And then our longest timer was 10 seconds. And then when it came to chest serious hit, 2 incapacitations and the longest timer was 7 seconds. So again, same sort of idea. This is where he's squishy, this is where he's squishy, and that extends one step further down. If I'm going to plant a thrust at Eric, I don't want to miss and go off to other targets. I want this to go into there, into his lungs, into his heart, into the solar plexus, into the mark, or worst comes to worst, if he lifts this up, it goes into more fatal things. The more I target the center area of him and fence like that, the better a chance I have of immediately incapacitating him, or Eric's not going to want to take one of those. And this is also from the side of if you get hit in these areas. If you get hit in that spot and don't immediately die, I just read some numbers to you. You may want to go ahead and call it on that. Because the longest timer we got there was about, 47 seconds? But that was on the top of the head cut and a light cut at that, right? The rest of the time it was under 20. You want to call it there. You're lucky you didn't die. Now the trickier bit is when it comes to other torso and limbs. So when it comes to other torso, again, this is the idea of I'm cutting. So for example, and Eric knows this one well, he's guarding his head and he's staying there and I go, oh neat, wolf. And I go ahead and take that target area by cutting his torso, or there have been other things along those lines. This could also be, arguably if we're here and I'm more on his chest, this could be a slice. I have seen that sort of thing happen in close grapples, etc. Or my thrust goes low and hits him more in the guts. That's going to lead to a longer time, and the numbers reflect that. This actually is quite surprising. So for the light hit, I didn't have a single timer. I ran 5 of them, I actually ran some extras. I didn't get a single timer on the other torso. When it came to the medium hit, I only got 1 timer and it was 43 seconds. And then when it came to the serious hit, that's when things got a little more exciting. The longest timer was 60 seconds, a full minute, and the shortest timer was 32 seconds. So in general, cutting at the ribs or thrusting, it can cause damage, but it's not going to be immediate. or even a terribly bad shot to take. So in particular, if you are used to playing under the idea of stopping when those sorts of hits land, and you're used to bind up close and then, ha, it's over. It's not. He probably is still up, and you may go ahead and fence through that. So I do recommend, if you're used to that kind of play, you adjust your target area, and I'll show you an option in a second. So the next thing we gotta talk about is limbs, and there's two different quality of limbs. There's cut to limb, and then there's thrust to limb. There's the differentiation. So a cut to the limb is in general a little more deadly, and this could be slices or full-on cuts. So a light cut to the limb, and this is like the most drastic results of all of them. A light cut, I had 4 of them did nothing. 1 of them gave a 29-second timer. On the medium, I had 1 of them do nothing, 1 incapacitation, and the longest timer was 46 seconds. And then on the serious hit, I had 3 incapacitations, and the longest timer was 23 seconds, which is a pretty big change. Goes from pretty much doing nothing to doing a lot of something. So in general, let's say we put ourselves in that situation again where his hands go up high, right? Oh my, go on your arm. There we go, right? Rather than me taking the torso, which I know at best is going to get me like a 20-second timer and probably expose my head anyway, but it's great, right? Maybe this would be a better time for me to see if I can get something pretty serious on that hand, be it a slice or a cut or what have you. Maybe I cut with a retreat. That has a much higher chance, not only of controlling him and keeping me safe, which is what this rule set is trying to encourage because consequences, but also I'm doing more damage to him. And so that's just a safer thing for me to go for overall, and if you're used to hand presses, boom, now's your opportunity, you're going to get rewarded for it. Limbs thrust, on the other hand, is where things get a little bit trickier. So when it came to limb thrust, of the light hits, once again, I had no timer. Of the medium hits, I had 1 timer that was 34 seconds. On the serious hits, my shortest timer was 11 seconds, and my longest timer was 33 seconds. Now, in general, you're not usually going for thrust to the limb. And I should point out, we've been using longswords for this whole thing. Of course, sword and buckler, messer, they're all going to be judged the same, but more prevalence might be given to attacking the limbs in some others. For example, with single swords, I might see the opportunity to plant a thrust onto his leg or things along those lines. But generally speaking, what occurs is I was thrusting his torso, and he parries me enough that it goes into his arm, or things along those lines. Those don't tend to come up all that much, but, well, it doesn't come up intentionally, it just kind of happens. And so in general, you don't really need to worry about that as much. It's not something too crazy, but bear in mind, if, for example, I find myself in a situation where I plant but haven't gotten anything yet, I'm not going to get a fight ender, but I might be able to get at least enough drive that I am causing him damage, and that's not a bad bet. I mean, 11 seconds off that, and I get myself safe, that's not a bad one. Now, our final one, and this is the one that is going to be very exciting for people to play under, is the hand shots. Of course, there's 2 camps about it. Hand shots do nothing, you shouldn't risk your head, and hand shots will break your hand, and blah, blah, blah. So I'll read you the numbers, and then we'll talk about strategy. So hand shots. The light hits, my longest timer was 85 seconds. I had 2 that did nothing. My normal shot, I had 2 incapacitations. My longest timer was 26 seconds. And then for my serious cut, 4 incapacitations, and my longest timer was 13 seconds, which is about the same as the shot to the face of the serious category. Now, this is also a good time to start talking about, okay, you've been saying these 3 kinds of, severity, how do you actually judge it? And again, you can play under whatever you want at home with this, but this is how it'll be done at EVOC. So light hit is not a very good bet. So if the best I can do, and in particular light hits are usually going to be things like that, or alternatively, another situation this comes up again, we'll go up into the rocks again, is people do like that, right? It's just on there. That's a light hit. There's no push, there's no power behind it, there's no structure behind it, you're just making contact. That's probably not going to do very much. It'll probably do something, but it's not going to do very much. And odds are, if your sword is on his hands, his sword is in your head. We've seen that over and over and over again. So unless you can actually dedicate some structure to it, it's probably not a safe bet. On the other hand, though, if you do find yourself in a situation, for example, maybe I throw a Scheitelhau and he covers with Chrome or what have you, and I see that opportunity to get that good slice, that's a serious hit to his hands, that's a serious press, that has a decent chance of incapacitating him, or he's going to walk away. Which now, let's go ahead and talk about severity. So, the way I will have my judges run this is it's not about power, it is about activation, and it is about quality of shot. So for example, Eric, pick any guard if you like. For example, and I'll just cut a variety of targets. If I just do a default cut and I hit the target I'm aiming for and all that, I don't need you to swing it terribly hard. All I need for it is you to get good extension, hit your target out about here, up would be preferable. On the sharpest bit, you don't need follow through, but if you can get follow through, that's great. Either as part of the cut or after the cut. So for example, that could be, I do literally cut through them, or alternatively that could be, I hit and I drag. Either way is completely fine. That's a good quality hit. At worst, that would get you normal. At best, if the judge thinks your activation is good, you can get a serious off of that. For thrusts, I don't need the sword to flex entirely, but I do need at least a little bit of press. This is the same as the way we judge the hits in the male. Basically, if I just get that sort of thing, that's light. Maybe since I had my hips behind it, I could get to normal. But what I'm really looking for is that little bit of movement. That's where you're gonna get guaranteed normal up into severe. Against the face, you don't need to jam their hand back. Like that could be, that's a stout. That's actually on the stouter side. So that's all relatively straightforward. Same with cuts to the limbs or thrusts to the limbs. In particular, let's go out into one point against each other, right? You see people go wham all the time. You don't need to hit harder to get a serious. All you need to do to get a good quality cut, in fact, let's switch that so I can show this extra detail. All you need to get good quality cut from me is get your hips involved. You need a little bit of push over. You just need that. Hips were involved either after the fact or as part of it. That's activation. That's a good quality cut. That's going to default get you a normal. What will not get you a normal and will generally going to be a light is things like that sort of cut. Sure, don't get me wrong. It was a good cut, and one of my judges might give you a normal at least. But that's never going to get serious. It's never going to get the fight unders or things like that. That's more of a tap. Especially in regards to hands, like we just talked about, things from below that just touch. Not going to get you much. I'm mostly looking for hand presses is really what I'd like to see if you're targeting those hands. Though, having said that, if I am cutting for someone's head like I should be and he puts his hands in the way, then of course, just don't get hit afterwards. So, the long and short of it, how do you win at Totentanz? The best way to win at is to protect the vital stuff. It's Huntsville Armored Weekend, even though we do an unarmored portion, your body is its own natural armor if you think about it. You've got certain places on your body you can eat a shot, because otherwise humans wouldn't be up and walking around after so many millennia. So, protect your internal organs here, protect your face, guard this general area as much as you can. Keep your hands behind your sword so that you don't lose them. And in general, when you go for your cuts or your actions or whatever, make sure that you can get good target activation and go for what you're aiming for. And you make a lot of choices. Like there, I made the active choice. I saw his gut was open, but that's not going to get me anything good. Let's get a good structured cut to the arms, and maybe I get something better for it. And that more considerate fencing will get you better results, will get you better judging, and being aware of what shots are really worth putting everything on the line to just defend versus which ones are more, oh, well, I got hit there. I can probably go in for one more, is really what's going to make the difference. Because the goal of Totentanz isn't to kill your opponent. That's just the most efficient way to not die, which is the goal. Otherwise, though, thank you very much for letting me abuse you, Eric. And thank you all very much for watching. Of course, there's the actual full rule for Totentanz, which I'll probably go ahead and remake before Yeehaw happens, but that's how we're going to be running it. That's how it's going to be judged. If you want to play around with the app yourself, it's the Hema Wound Timers, I think it's its full name, on the App Store, so it's nice and easy to get. I'll see if I can put a link to it in the description. But either way, it's a good rule set, and you can tweak it if you want, but that's how it's going to be. I look forward to seeing everyone fight under it again. And otherwise, thank you very, very much for watching. We'll go with some other techniques another time.